Once you have completed your 3 motors as described in the previous segment, you may now follow this chapter in connecting their brown and black wires to the speaker wire tether constructed in the first segment of the video manual. This segment of the Aquabotz manual will detail a waterproofing technique near the end which will need to be completed outdoors. For this purpose, prepare to complete this portion of the video manual on a day where precipitation will not prohibit you from doing so. Now, before I can start with the first instructions for the segment, I must pause the video manual here to clarify a point about the speaker wire used for the duration of the video manual. Here on the screen I have 2 different kinds of speaker wire. The first one here has already been shown in the first segment. Both wires are copper colored, and the only distinction is that one wire of the pair is marked with a white stripe. The other wire is not. This second type of speaker wire, however, will appear throughout the rest of the video manual and must hence be introduced due to one specific difference. Where the first type of speaker wire has a white stripe, this second kind of speaker wire instead has a silver or gray wire. So throughout the manual I will refer to the marked or striped wire. This marked wire will thus be either striped or gray because this distinction is in fact the defining mark. The second wire for each pair will thus be referred to as the unmarked or blank wire. In either case, it will be the copper wire without any stripe or defining mark to identify it by. Having thus made this distinction, the video manual's instructions will now resume. To begin this segment, we will need the following items and tools: your recently completed 30-foot tether, the 3 motors completed in the previous segment of the video manual, liquid electrical tape, regular electrical tape, 2 small zip ties, a pair of wire cutters, and a pair of wire strippers. Once you have gathered these items, clear the workspace in front of you except for your tether and a single motor. To begin, we will connect the first motor to a single wire pair coming from the tether. To do this, grasp one end of your tether, it does not matter which end, and separate one of the wire pairs from the other 2. Then, separate the 2 wires from each other by a few inches using your wire cutters to split them down the middle. This will allow you to connect the 2 wires of the pair individually. Next, remove the rubber band from the motor's wires and straighten them out as best you can. Once this is done, examine the end of your 2 brown and black motor wires. If there is any amount of exposed wire, use your wire cutters to snip them just behind the end of the lining. To keep a good practice of standardized uniformity between all Aquabotz, connect the black motor wire to the tether's marked wire, and the brown motor wire will then be connected to the blank/unmarked wire. To strip the first wire, which in this case will be the black motor wire, take a moment to examine your wire strippers. You should notice a number of holes that incrementally descend in size. On either side of each hole will be a number designating a specific wire gauge, the most common being 12/14. For the purpose of using this video manual, 2 different gauges are needed. Whenever you strip motor wires, the brown and black wires, use the 14/16 gauge on your wire strippers. And whenever you strip speaker wire, use the slightly larger 12/14 gauge. Now that I've explained which specific gauge is used to strip a particular kind of wire, we will strip the first wire, the black motor wire, of an inch of its lining. To do this, position the strippers an inch behind the end of the wire and close both ends of the 14/16 gauge around the wire tightly, in effect cutting the wire's lining. To now strip the wire of its lining, keep a tight grip on your wire and push the lining straight off of the wire with your strippers. Make sure to push the lining off in a straight line and not in a bending motion. Do not use your thumb to assist pushing the lining off either. In any case, avoid removing the wires in anything other than a single straight motion. Having now stripped the black wire of its lining, put your strippers momentarily aside and twist the exposed wires together. Now, take a hold of your tether and strip the marked, so either silver or striped, wire of an inch of its lining as well. To strip the first marked wire on your tether that has been separated from its unmarked wire, use the 12/14 gauge of your wire strippers and, as demonstrated before, cut the wire's lining, and then remove it in a single straight motion. Like the black wire before it, also take a moment to tighten and twist together these exposed wires as well. With the first two wires stripped, we will now make the first connection. To do this, hold the end of each exposed wire in a separate hand so that they make an X, as seen here. Then, holding the center of this X between your thumb and forefinger, use your other hand to twist the two wires around each other. Once you have completed this, fold these two wires down against the end of your speaker wire. This completes the very first connection. Now, repeat this connection process for the motor's brown wire and the unmarked wire from the same speaker wire pair. So, taking the motor's brown wire, use the 14/16 gauge to strip it of an inch of its lining. Then, twist together the exposed wire ends, and then strip the unmarked wire from the tether's partially connected wire pair. Having then twisted this exposed speaker wire together, then connect the unmarked and brown wires together in the same manner that the black and marked wires were just beforehand. Make sure to fold the connected wires down against the speaker wire. This now completes the first of 3 full motor to tether connections for your bot. Follow these exact instructions for your remaining 2 wire pairs and motors. Once all 3 motors have been secured to the tether in this manner, you may then continue on to the waterproofing segment of the video manual, which here follows. Now that you've connected all 3 of your motors to the tether, this next portion of the segment will take place outdoors in a well-ventilated location. To counteract the effects of corrosion, the use of liquid electrical tape as a waterproofing sealant results in very nauseating and hazardous fumes, which affect the lungs if exposed to them indoors for a prolonged period of time. As such, it is paramount that this next portion of the manual be completed outdoors. To start, find something which your tether can be drawn out over. To demonstrate this, I've used a sawhorse here on the deck. Other options could include something smaller, such as a large plastic box, or even a chair. In any case, simply find something or some place that allows you to suspend the motor to tether connections above the ground without being in contact with anything else. This goes for other connections as well, however. Notice here how none of the individual wire connections are in contact with one another. When we coat each wire with the liquid tape, no 2 wires may be in contact with one another. As such, this must be another consideration to make when suspending your wires and giving the tether enough slack to keep them separated from one another. Once you have taken the time to set up your wires as such, take your liquid tape and give it a good shake before applying it to the wires. Next, one connection at a time, brush the liquid tape onto all exposed wire. Be sure to check the underside of every wire in case any was missed on the first pass of the brush. Also, make sure to avoid letting any coatings dry while in contact with other nearby connections. After coating all exposed wires in this manner the first time, let the wire sit to dry for a couple of hours, and then revisit the connections for a second coat. Be sure to patch up any holes and any still exposed wires. You should coat every wire a minimum of 2 times. More coats of liquid tape are suggested, however. Once finished your last coat, allow the liquid tape to dry completely before continuing on with the rest of the segment. After your 6 motor to tether connections have finished drying their last coat of liquid tape outdoors, bring the bot back inside to your workspace. Each of the 6 connections are now ready to be wrapped in electrical tape. First, each individual connection will be wrapped, and then all 6 of them will be wrapped into a single bundle and secured on either end with a small zip tie. To begin, simply take any one of the 6 connections and expose the end of your electrical tape. Then, placing the tape on the motor wire end of your connection, making sure that the tape is behind the liquid tape, tightly wrap the roll of tape around the entire connection. Do not leave any gaps in the wrapping process as shown here. Once your tape has reached the speaker wire end of the connection, simply tear or cut off the end of the tape, finish the wrap against the speaker wire, and repeat this step for the other 6 connections. Once all 6 connections have been individually wrapped, use your electrical tape to wrap them into a single bundle starting from the motor wire end. Starting behind the individual connections, keep a practice of tightly and neatly wrapping the electrical tape around the wires. And do not stop once you've made a single pass over to the speaker wire end. Continuing to coil the tape around the connections, wrap the tape around for a second pass, ending back over on the motor wire side where you first began the wrap. Once you've made sure that there are no gaps left in your wrapping, take your 2 small zip ties and secure them to either side of your wrapping. One of them should be placed on the very end of where your electrical tape was cut, so as to keep it from unraveling in the future. After you've placed the last of your zip ties on the electrical tape wrapping, continue on to the next segment of the video manual, which covers construction of the power cables and battery pack.